It's Colorado's biggest business indictment in a decade. DaVita and its former CEO, who flirted with a run for governor, are now facing federal charges. We compare the natural COVID-19 immunity from getting the virus to the protection that's provided by vaccines. Denver School Board Director Tay Anderson defends asking the public to send him personal donations and says voters don't need to know where his money comes from. In one of Colorado's iconically beautiful spots, rangers have discovered more than 1,000 piles of human waste.
Are you me?
No, we're not. And the rangers are ready to charge every visitor for the cleanup. Next. One of Denver's largest employers and its former boss, who wanted to be the governor, have been indicted on federal charges. DaVita and its former CEO, Kent Thiry, are charged with manipulating the job market. Thiry and DaVita are accused of conspiring with their competitors to not hire each other's senior-level employees. Thiry could face 10 years in prison. That's him in the Musketeers costume. This has kind of been his thing for years. It's a long story. Back to the indictment. DaVita, the company, could face up to $200 million in fines. Sounds like a lot, but the kidney dialysis company has made major payouts part of its business model. Our partners at Colorado Politics noted $970 million in recent settlements by DaVita and a $383 million verdict against the company for the deaths of its patients. Thiry's been talked about for years as a Republican or unaffiliated candidate for governor. He's put his considerable political power and wealth behind the successful effort to change how Colorado does redistricting. His spokeswoman said today that Thiry did not break the law, and they accused federal prosecutors of hiding evidence. Thiry's indictment is the highest profile criminal case against a Colorado business executive since Quest Joe Naccio more than a decade ago. Denver School Board Director Tay Anderson is back doing school board business while an external investigation continues into anonymous secondhand allegations of sexual assault. Anderson's denied those claims, and no victim has come forward to Denver police, to the best of our knowledge. Anderson also faces financial questions. He frequently solicits donations from the public, not campaign contributions, donations for his personal expenses. The DPS board gig doesn't pay a dime. Anderson told us that he keeps his campaign donations and his personal donations separate. And he said it's not the public's business how he makes money.
I think every elected official has a different means of how they make their own money, and I don't think that we necessarily question every elected official in the state of Colorado outside of your elected duty. How do you get your job? How do you make your money? And I know that if I disclose that on here, that people will utilize this as an opportunity to attack any employer that I may be representing or being paid by, and I'm not going to allow that to happen today or anytime.
That was part of Anderson's extended interview with our Victoria De Leon. Her reporting on Director Anderson continues tonight on 9 News at 9 and 10. There are Coloradans who are counting on having immunity from having COVID already to protect them from getting the virus again. Nusha Roy looks at how that natural immunity compares to the protection we get from vaccines.
There have been studies that actually looked at people that had COVID at baseline and got the vaccine or got placebo.
Dr. Michelle Barron at UC Health is really good at analogies, which is very helpful in this situation. She said her understanding so far is that a person's natural immunity to COVID is a lot more tailored to what happened to your body, while the vaccine is more encompassing. To understand what that really means,
Think about your immune system as being a very highly refined military operation. And sometimes when, the threat is simple, they send out the frontline troops. If it's a severe attack on you, then your special forces and your full army are actually engaged in this.
There's a difference in your immune response if you felt like you had a cold versus the full force fighting that's involved when you're in the hospital or on a ventilator. That second response is one your body will remember a lot more. The natural immunity response is not consistent while the vaccine is fighting full force all the time. Dr. Barron explained how she knows that.
They have the benefit of designing it exactly as you want.
But it isn't that straightforward.
If you are exposed to a virus later on,
how rigorous will your body's response be?
Because you have antibody means we can detect a response, but is it the right response? Is the right troops ready and available for you? And with the variants, we haven't been able to really assess that yet.
The idea is that vaccines will provide more consistent protection, with the caveat that there is still a lot to learn.
The question is, how long will your immunity last if you've either had a vaccine or you've been naturally exposed? And the short answer is nobody knows. It does appear that the immunity so far will be at least 12 months.
So the vaccines have variabilities too that impacts how well it's going to work. So that could be underlying health conditions or the variants like they were just talking about. But overall, the doctors were saying that it is showing to keep people out of the hospital and prevent a lot of people from dying. That is why doctors, along with the state health department, are saying to get the vaccine even if you had COVID. And Kyle, that was something that we heard repeatedly from every person that we talked to today.
Because so much of this seems individual to individual people's circumstances. And also, we should note that some people who think they're going to have a very hard time with COVID have an easy go, and vice versa. Very healthy people get very sick. I imagine there also has to be some variability in natural immunity.
Yeah, absolutely. And you heard the doctors talking about that too a little bit of, okay, if you were exposed to COVID, let's say a year ago or 6 months ago, and you're exposed again, are you exposed to a different strain of COVID, and how well does your body respond to that? And that's something, frankly, that they're still trying to figure out, because all of this is still relatively new, Kyle. And they were saying that overall, though, because of the way the vaccine was designed, that it has a lot more broader protection, and which is why they're still encouraging people to get it.
All right. Thank you, Nusha. 89% is a solid free throw percentage. It's a passing grade in any course. 89% is also, unfortunately, the amount of COVID-19 in our state that is now made up of that more dangerous Delta variant. Colorado has never seen a COVID variant this dominant. Public health experts say the vaccines are effective against Delta. They're still hoping the vaccination rates will increase, because the idea is that if we can prevent the churn of the virus here and elsewhere, we might prevent the cultivation of the next variant, one that might start punching through our vaccine protection. Tonight's next question comes from Deborah. She reached out after the repeated closures of I-70 through Glenwood Canyon because of the risk of floods and mudslides.
I'm curious, with all the closings on I-70 through Glenwood Canyon, does that affect the Amtrak train going through the canyon?
Great question, Deborah. I-70's been closed 7 times in the last 3 weeks because of mudslides and flash flood warnings. CDOT's concerned that more mud and debris from the Grizzly Creek fire burn scar is going to come down on the highway like it did twice in June. But to your question, Amtrak service has not been disrupted. In fact, people have been encouraged to use the train as an alternative. This is actually really simple. Amtrak runs on the opposite side of the canyon from the burn scar, so it's protected. Amtrak was not ready to offer us any details on whether they're seeing increased ridership as the highway function's been disrupted. If you have a question that you would like answered, send us a video or an audio message, and our team will work hard to find you an answer, because chances are, if you have a question, you're probably not the only one. Denverites are getting mailed lead test kits to check their water at home. They're doing this citywide. Some citizens are reporting they're having trouble following the directions. Porque no hablas español. Denver Water says it was a printing error that caused some kits to come only with Spanish instructions. Customer first alerted them to this last week. They're not sure how many testing kits are missing English instructions. Denver Water says they're looking into it. If you have a kit and you would like instructions en inglés, you can call the customer care team or visit their website to get a PDF or video instructions. Might even be fun to, you can line them up side by side with the Spanish instructions and learn a few words in the new language. Come away better at the end of the day. Number in the link right at the bottom of the screen.
I had grave concerns that the fallout of that was going to be quite dramatic. And at least for our suicides, it wasn't.
A surprising finding about the pandemic's impact, or lack of impact, on Colorado's suicide rates. Lodo was popping for All-Star Weekend. Businesses outside Coors Field's halo say it was actually much slower than normal. And the U.S. Forest Service is so sick of people treating the Maroon Bells Wilderness like a toilet, they're considering charging the rest of the visitors for the cleanup. Next. Mental health is one of the toughest and most necessary topics we talk about here. Sure did it a lot during the worst of the pandemic. We were both stuck at home, and you could tell it was taking a toll on people. There was fear that the pandemic, the lockdowns, would lead to more suicides. All that talk about mental health might have saved some lives. Here's Mark Salinger.
There's no other way to say it. This past year has been tough, really tough for a lot of people.
The impact of the pandemic wasn't just people that died from the virus. There's excess deaths nearly across the board.
Dr. Leon Kelly has had the busiest year on record as the El Paso County coroner. Yet there's one cause of death that in fact went down, even with the fear that it would rise sharply as we all sat isolated at home.
I had grave concerns that the fallout of that was going to be quite dramatic. And at least for our suicides, it wasn't.
Suicide. It's not an easy topic to bring up. And yet, the pandemic has made it easier to talk about our mental health. That may have saved lives.
I think that is one of the true bright spots of the pandemic, was this collective acceptance and understanding of how we needed to make our own mental health a priority.
El Paso County saw 178 deaths by suicide in 2020, compared to 180 the year before. It's a large number, no doubt. In fact, it was the most of any county in the state last year. But that number didn't go up during the pandemic, as Dr. Kelly and lots of others had feared.
It's not necessarily a cause for great celebration. It's still 178 of our citizens took their own life.
Across the state, the trend is similar. 1,294 people died by suicide in 2020, down slightly from just over 1,300 in 2019 before the pandemic. Still, it's higher than most other years.
We ask each caller about thoughts or plans for suicide.
Bev Marquez runs Rocky Mountain Crisis Partners and Colorado Crisis Services. The crisis hotline has seen a 37% increase in calls and texts since the pandemic began. People are asking for help and finding it more convenient than ever to receive it.
While there weren't a lot of face-to-face services available, there were a lot more telephonic and telehealth kinds of services available.
Help is just a call away. For Next, I'm Mark Salinger.
There certainly are other causes of death that we did see go up during the pandemic. Overdose deaths hit historic numbers in Colorado last year and across the country. Take this opportunity to remind you, as Mark did, that help for you or someone you know is available 24/7, 365 from local people at Colorado Crisis Services. Call 1-844-493-8255 or text the word TALK to 38255.
A little blue sky today, a little sunshine, and still a little bit of bad air around the area. But with that extra sunshine, slightly warmer, upper 80s today. We're headed for the 90s tomorrow. Isolated storms will track from the northwest to the southeast and move out tonight. We do it all over again tomorrow. One or two of those storms will have some heavy rain. Partly cloudy and 60 in Denver tonight. Tomorrow with sunshine or high at 90. Slight chance of a foothill storm, and then we shut off the moisture. Sunshine and 90 Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Well, you get the idea.
How many times have we talked about Colorado's wild areas being loved to death? The problem in the Maroon Bell Snowmass Wilderness area is the opposite. It is a lack of love and care and even just decency for the outdoors that now has the Forest Service considering a new camping fee. The use of the trails there has quadrupled in the last 15 years. That alone would not be a problem. It's that a lot of those new visitors are refusing to pick up after themselves, leaving trash and actual human waste that rangers have to go out and collect. From 2014 to 2020, they trucked out 1.5 tons of garbage from the wilderness. And 1,573 times they've had to dig ditches for drop deuces that were left in the woods. Rangers are understandably fed up with the lack of consideration, on top of the issues of overcrowding and loss of vegetation that come with the annual camping numbers going from 4,000 people in 2006 to more than 18,000 last year. So the Forest Service is proposing a $12 a night fee for overnight use in one of the most visited areas of the wilderness. Would not impact the folks who drive to see the Maroon Bell Scenic Area or take the shuttles there. They'd use that fee money to restore the most damaged areas, to hire more rangers, and to educate humans to not you-know-what in the woods like we're bears and just leave it sitting there. The All-Star Game was supposed to lift up local businesses.
It almost felt like we were in the midst of the pandemic again.
It does not seem to have had much of a ripple effect outside Lodo. That's next. So many of the stories about the MLB AllStar Game coming to Denver talked about the economic boost that it would give struggling businesses. Walk more than a few blocks away from Coors Field like we did, and you'll hear businesses talking about the AllStar Game that brought them their worst weekend since they reopened after the pandemic.
It's just madness, just waves of people leaving the train, going towards the stadium. You turn around and walk one block the other direction and it's a ghost town. My name is Jeffrey Knott and I'm a co-owner of Room for Millie. We're a specialty cocktail bar over on Platt Street. So we're really close to the Rockies Stadium where all the All-Star Game activities were. Just a few minutes walk from all of that. We actually felt the downturn before Tuesday night even. So even the weekend leading up to it, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, they were all substantially down. I think all the cautioning that the local community has heard over the past few weeks has kind of scared them away. So people that would normally come in just chose to stay away. I don't know anyone on our street that did have an uptick in business. I think we're all in the same boat together.
All-Star Weekend, we were expecting a little bit busier of a weekend. Brought in some extra products, some extra staff. Turns out we didn't really need any of that stuff. We had a pretty slow week.
Have a great day, guys. Thank you. Same concept here. It was just like we upstaffed. And then so there's just a bunch of us hanging out, and I was like, oh, it's not as busy as what I was expecting it to be.
I would say to the folks who are in charge of bringing these types of events to the city that the economic impact has probably a circumference of effectiveness, and outside of that circumference you're probably going to maybe harm some business. It's great for the city, but maybe not great for particular neighborhoods in the city.
Denver Sports Commission told us it's going to take a few weeks to total up the economic impact of the All-Star Game on the city. I'm not saying that I do not believe their estimate of $60 to $100 million. It just seems like a lot. If you see people driving in the mountains and think you're riding past a limo full of high schoolers on the Vegas Strip, that's not how you Colorado. Photo of that in your feedback next. Hanging out the sunroof on your ride down the mountain like it's prom night in one of those fancy limos? That's not how you Colorado. Bob was headed down Pikes Peak when he got stuck behind this driver and their passenger who may be taking a selfie or shooting a short film or something else out the sunroof. The license plate and the behavior say Florida. Clearly not how you Colorado, and a great way to take a wayward branch of an aspen tree right to the dome. So be careful out there, folks. Feedback tonight from one of the good Karens. Karen H. writes, I thought Kyle's suggestion about learning a new language in order to read the instructions for the lead test kits was excellent. Maybe some people will realize how very difficult it is and grouse less about people who have lived here a while and still don't know the language. I would say this, Karen, if we see the opportunity as one of exploration when you encounter a new language and not inconvenience, seems like it might make our days a little bit easier. I don't know. See you next time.